So I haven't done a fabrication video in a while, so today's project is going to combine a few things. Got a little wood here, got some steel, and I'm going to make some shelving units to go on the wall. So I've got a 1x8 S4S pine board here. You can get that at Home Depot or Lowe's. I've got just a basic 2x4 that we'll go ahead and run through a planer, get it looking all nice. So you just get that. Obviously any wood yard or any lumber yard would have that, as well as Home Depot and Lowe's. And then I've got it's 1 1/2 inch across and 1/4 inch thick flat bar steel. This is going to make the bracket that's going to sit on top of here, and then the part that the shelves sit on, which this is what the shelf material will be. I've got some Schedule 40 steel pipe here and 3/4 inch. So that's what I'm going to make up the shelving part, and then I need some basic hardware. So these will go on the ends of the pipe, and this is what I'm going to need to assemble and mount everything. I'll take you through that as I go, because it's going to be a little hard to explain, but you'll see how it comes together. And hopefully when I'm done, I have a pretty good looking shelf. So, all right, well, step one, I'm going to start cutting some of the pipe. So I'm going to first thing I'm going to do is cut a piece of this pipe. I'm cutting a 17-inch length. The shelves are basically, the wood that makes them up is 1 1/8 inches. I'm cutting this at 17. I'm going to try and make 2, and I have a hole saw that goes in between. So I'm cutting a little extra because I can always trim it to length here in case anything happens when I'm trying to use the tubing notcher, and I'll show you how that works. But first thing is just get a piece I can work with at about the right length, and that is the 17-inch piece. So here we go. So I've got this pipe tubing notcher in my drill press here. So I've got this basically in the center. And so what we're going to do is we're going to notch this pipe, giving me 2 curved pieces. And I'll show you how that'll come together on the rails for the shelves. But the first thing we're going to do is basically use the hole, or the tubing notcher, cut this pipe in half. A few notes: definitely want to put some oil on this while you're drilling. So I was able to use the tubing notcher to cut that in half, and I got 2 pieces here, and I'm just going to take an angle grinder because, you know, it's not the perfect situation, and I'm cutting 2 pieces of pipe, so I'm just going to clean this little lip up with an angle grinder, which would be good enough for what I'm doing. And then I unfortunately have to do that 2 more times because I need a total of 6 of these. The other thing is if you don't have a drill press and a pipe tubing notcher, you can approximate this by taking a angle grinder and just trying to swish out what you can with an angle grinder, and then you just, you know, kind of weld it on and just make sure you're straight with your weld. To me, it's worth a little extra time to use the tubing notcher because it just gives you such a cleaner result, and then I can really make my welds pretty. And since this is a decorative well, it's a shelf, but it's also like a decorative piece in the room, I want it to look really good, so taking that little bit of extra time is well worth it. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut all the pipe with the tubing notcher. So I've got essentially the rails for the shelf there. So now this is the part that's going to kind of go on the front to connect the rails, and then I have flat bar that'll go in the back. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this to length. So I'm going 33 inches. Obviously this could be arbitrary if you're doing this yourself. Depends on what size you want your shelf to be. You could add more rails, you could add you could do less and make it longer. It just kind of depends, but for this I'm going 33 inches, so I'm going to just cut this pipe in half, and then we're on to the next step, which is getting some of this ready to weld. The next thing we need to do, so we get a clean weld, and I'm going to have to do this where all the surface is made up, is I'm going to go ahead and take my Dremel tool here, and I'm going to go ahead and run it and get the paint off of this pipe so that when I get a nice clean weld. So let's go ahead and do that. So I cut the two pieces of pipe to 33 inches, so now I'm going to cut two pieces of flat bar here to the same length, and this will be the part that goes up against the wall, and I'm going to have a wood accent, but I'll show you how that's going to look in a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and get these flat bar cut. So I've got all my steel cut and I cleaned up, so I've got an area here where to weld. And because of the idea that it's kind of the look of this is to give it a little, you know, to kind of make it look semi-industrial, and so trying to keep the paintings on the pipe. I know that this particular part of the shelf will face the door in the room it's going in, so I'm trying to keep as much of this writing on there. So I'm going to go ahead and get to welding this, and so hopefully I can get one of these welded, and then I'll have half of this done. All right. Alright, so I've tack welded up the pipe onto the vertical bar, and so now what I did is I cut, this is just some scrap wood I have, I made this into a story stick, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut each of these to the exact length, and what that'll do is make sure that these are exactly even, so that when I weld this on the flat bar it'll all look the same. So let me go ahead and get the saw going here. So I cut the two pieces. This center part doesn't fit in the saw, but that's why you cut the two ends here, because it basically, that means that the top and the bottom will be perfect, and if this is a little bit short, I can make up from the welder where it's a little hard to do if I'm off on the two ends. So I'm just going to take my angle grinder here with a cutting wheel. I'm just going to cut off that part of the pipe, and then we're on to the next part. So I have my flat bar here. My design is to have 2 bolts on this flat bar. So I measured. So I have a 2 and an 1/8 inch inset to the center of the pipe off the ends of this. Then in the middle here, between basically the 2 pipes that sit on here, I have this marked. And so now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and drill the hole. And so this is where this bolt's going to go, and this is going to mount on a 2x4, but I'll show you that part when we get to the woodworking part of this. But first I'm going to drill this hole, or actually 2 of them in this flat bar. Okay, so I've got the holes here drilled in the flat bar. So I've got that, and then I've got this set up so that you can see here I've got the magnets holding it upright. I believe I've got it perfectly square over here. So now I'm going to tack weld this in, and then once that's done, then I'll move on to putting the pieces here on the end. But go ahead and get that tack welded is the next step. Okay. Alright, so I got everything tack welded in. So the last thing I got to do is these ends, I got to get them welded on. So I got a magnet here. Then I'm going to go ahead and weld underneath. Just need a little bit here just to tack them on because this isn't structural. So just don't want them to come off. Okay. So I've got the 2 brackets all tacked up. I'll finish weld those at some point, but what I want to do now is get the wood part of this done. So I've got your just basic 2x4 that you get from Home Depot or Lowe's, and I'm going to go ahead and mill that so it becomes nice and square. And then what happens is these brackets are going to mount onto the 2x4, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that after I get this milled. Okay, so I've got the board milled, and you can see how it's like a typical 2x4 will have some rounding on the sides. It's completely square, it looks nice and cleaned up. So now I'm going to cut this. I basically have an 1¼ inch reveal on the top and the bottom, so I marked it, and now I'm just going to take my saw and I'm just going to go ahead and cut this to length, and then I'll show you how the fasteners go. So the last thing I did here was I centered the bracket onto the wood, and I marked these 2 holes here, and so that's where I'm going to go ahead and drill holes, and then I'll show you the fasteners I'm using. So I've got my hole marked on the wood here, so I'm just going to go ahead and drill the hole for these T-nuts that I have, so we can put those in. So just have to do that 4 more times. I'm done drilling the holes, so I just have the holes in there, and then these are T-nuts, and they just hammer in, and this will allow a bolt to come from the front. So I'm just going to hammer these in. I'll try and do it on camera, see how I do. I might put it down just so I can do a better job. So yeah, I'm going to use both hands for this, but I just need to hammer it in, and then I'll show you how it all comes together. I hammered in my T-nuts, and you can see that they're in the back, so I'm just going to flip this over, set my bracket on, try and line that up, And then these bolts should just thread right through. There we go. Let's go ahead and do the other part here. And now I have my shelf. So going to do a little touch-up painting on this. So I bought a few different kinds of paint. Actually, this is something I just generally have on hand. So I got some Rust-Oleum gloss black, and then I thought I would take a look at this hammered black. To be honest, so I did a couple of test paints here. So here is the hammered. It really ended up being much more gray than black. So I'm preferring the black, but I did a test paint so I could kind of see what it would look like when you put it on there. And so I think the black looks good. The other thing I did is I have a couple clear coats, and I just sprayed both of them on, half on one side, half on the other side. There really doesn't appear to be any difference in the sheen on the pipe, but you can see here when you look at it up against the regular pipe, it does put a nice gloss finish. This is going in a bathroom, so if it's going to go in a bathroom, you know, obviously we got a little bit of the patina of the rust, which looks great, but I don't want it with all the humidity in there. That could potentially get, you know, much worse and then maybe not look as pleasing. So I'm going to put the clear coat on. So what I'm going to do here is I think I'm going to paint these caps black so that they'll look like this, and with the matching the sheen of the pipe, I think that'll look great, because when you set this against the pipe here, you can see that looks pretty consistent. And then the only other thought is this is kind of this grayer metal, and I had to, because it kind of came semi-painted, and I can see here that I had to grind off, obviously, before I welded. And so now my thought is I'm also going to put black paint on this, and then that will basically look the same color as this when I put the sheen on. And so I think we're basically getting through the painting part of this. There will also be, I'll explain how I'm going to handle the finish with the stain too, for the shelves and the wood rails that go against the wall. Alright, so I clear coated the metal. So I just used this Rust-Oleum, just did a rattle can. A little easier than getting out the high volume, low pressure paint gun, and just did a quick clear coat. And so what it did is put a nice little shine on all this, but it's preserving the patina, and so that looks great. And the other thing I did is I painted this with Rust-Oleum, and then before I put on the clear coat, I just took my rotary tool here and I just scuffed up the paint so that it gave this a little bit of a look down here, beaten like the pipe, and I think I've got a nice blend. The other thing that I did was on the ends here, I took the back of the paintbrush after I painted this and just knocked it with the back of the paintbrush. You can see there, and it puts these scuffs in there, and then I clear coat it, and it looks like it's scratched, and so that helps beat up the ends a little bit so they don't look perfect as well. So those couple of aesthetics, and so these basically are done. And so now I'm working on, for my fasteners, I'm just going to drill a couple holes here and here, because this is where my fasteners are going to go, and then the metal shelf racks go on here. And basically at that point then I'm just going to cut shelves the length and put some stain on this wood. So go ahead and drill those holes. I've got the two holes where the fasteners are going to go drilled, and obviously I need to sink those into the wood a little bit, so I'm just going to take my drill here and I'm going to go ahead and just drill a little slot for the fasteners to fit. So I've got the holes all drilled, everything's ready to go. So the last part, just because you've got some pencil that I had to mark and I've got scuffs on this, so I'm just taking my random orbital sander here with the 100 grit and just giving it a quick once over, and then we can go ahead and stain this. So I'm on to finally cutting the wood for the shelves to length. So I've got my S4S pine, and I'm cutting this to 21 7/8 because that's how it's going to work for where my shelves are going. Obviously, if you decide to take on this project, you'll cut it to whatever length makes sense for where you're going to put your shelves. Okay, so I'm at the part where I'm going to stain the wood. So I got some stain here. I got a brush that can use with stain, and I have all my wood sanded. And you can see everything's all nice and clean and looks good. So let's go ahead and get the stain on there, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So we have the wood stained here, and then the last thing I'm going to do, because seal the wood here with some polyurethane, and then it's time to basically get all this mounted on the wall. So I'll show you how it all looks when I'm done. Okay, so the last little part of this is I've got these electrical pipe 2-hole straps. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes and mount these on the bottom of the shelf to help hold. It's more or less aesthetic, but it's going to help hold the shelf in place in case someone accidentally knocks into it. Sorry, I should put it like that. And so I'll have a couple of these on there, and then I'll show you what the final result looks like. Okay, so we got the shelving unit mounted on the wall and all the 2 holes affixed to it and the shelf stained. So this is kind of the finished product. I think it looks pretty amazing. So just kind of talk you through sort of what my sort of stylization in my mind when I came up with this is, you know, I like the, you know, kind of shabby chic aspect of having the metal piping here. So, you know, taking advantage of something that just comes from the metal yard like this, and then the idea of kind of, you know, making even the pieces that are newer look like they're beat up by scuffing it. And then adding the accents of taking the galvanized against the metal, I think helps give you some great contrast along with the wood against the metal. And then I have the galvanized hardware here, and I like the idea that the, you know, galvanized washer and the locking washer, and the locking washer obviously is just for aesthetics. Doesn't functionally do anything because it's not like if this house vibrates that much, then got bigger problems than what this locking washer is going to do. And so, you know, this plays really well off of this, and so you just have all these little accents, and it creates, I think, this really great installed piece. So, you know, as always, if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel, comment, and like below, and I hope some of you take on this project. I'd love for you to post pictures and videos of what you did. You know, remember always the rule of thumb with this is if you do decide to follow this, you don't have to follow it exactly. Make it yours, steal from what I did, change it aesthetically to make it work with what you're trying to do. Because there's lots of variations on these kind of things out there. What I think makes this so great is the design I did is unique to this house that I put it in. So, all right, thanks everyone.